Hi, I'm Trey My topic surrounds television and adolescence. Television has become increasingly popular over the years. According to the Nielsen's Audience Television Report, there are roughly 3 television sets per family in the U.S., and since the average family size is about 3 people, any person in that family can watch television at any given time. But this causes a problem for adolescents because adolescents is defined like they're trying to find their self-identity, but some are too scared to go talk to their parents or friends, so they look for support and guidance in TV. According to the World Health Organization, many adolescents face pressures to use alcohol, cigarettes, or other drugs, initiate sexual relationships at early ages, putting themselves at a high risk for intentional and unintentional injuries, unintended pregnancies, and risk for STDs. So this leads to my proposition that exposure to television has a significantly harmful effect on an adolescent's development. I'll be supporting my claims by showing that explicit scenes on television increases early adult behavior. Explicit scenes on television increase violent behavior, and television leads to the lowering of intellect in adolescents. So for my first point, that explicit scenes on television increases early adult behavior. So adult behavior consists of copying the actions of an adult, like having sex or drinking. So adolescents experience sexual maturity too early due to exposure to TV sex. This can be seen in a research conducted by Rebecca L. Collins, who is a behavioral scientist. And she said that researchers measured levels of exposure to 3 kinds of sexual content on television. 1, sexual behavior such as kissing, intimate touching, and depicted intercourse. 2, talk about sexual plans or desires or about sex that has occurred. And 3, talk about the risk of having sex. The results showed that heavy exposure to sexual content related strongly to teens having sex within the following year because they felt that they knew enough about it, but in reality they really don't. So basically, early sexual exploration can have unforeseen consequences like STD, HIV, and stuff like that. Also, adolescents matured too early with exposure to alcohol on television. This is seen, according to a study conducted by the National Council of Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, research found that youth are more than 5 times more likely to consume alcohol brands that advertise on national television and 36% more likely to consume alcohol brands that advertise in national magazines compared to brands that don't advertise in these forms of media. Basically, that constant exposure to the TV ads of alcohol causes teens to find a way to consume that same type of alcohol because they TV ads make it look fun and cool, but alcohol is never good for teenagers. So my second point is explicit scenes on television increase violence in adolescents. Majority of TV programs idealize violence, and in the American Academy of Pediatrics, the National Television Violence Study found the following, that nearly 2/3 of all programming contains violence. Children's shows contain the most violence, portrayals of violence are usually glamorized, and perpetrators often go unpunished. This causes teens to see the pros to violence, but not necessarily the consequences. And this can be seen where ABC conducted a story where teenagers were copying the movie Jackass, where teens would go out, do stuff, and then videotape it. So in Florida, a group of teens are shown using drugs and vandalizing 8 homes under construction. In Wisconsin, 2 kids took pictures of themselves slashing tires and vandalizing cars. And in Illinois, a group of kids taped themselves busting up neon signs and streetlights. Basically, teenagers' exposure to this idealization of violence causes them to have an unrealistic view of violence. And teenagers are still mentally developing because they don't even realize that videotaping their crime is what gets them caught and prosecuted. My next point is that television leads to the lowering of intellect in adolescents. According to a study conducted by Cambridge University, research suggests that 14-year-olds who spend an hour a day on screens during their leisure time score 9 fewer points on the GSCE. When the sum of their grades is calculated, it's the equivalent of dropping 2 grades from a B to a D, and that 2 extra hours results in 18 fewer points. So the GSCE is standardized testing in the UK, and the time spent on watching TV is time that can be used for intellectual gains. This also can be seen in a study conducted by the National Library of Medicine that showed findings that indicate that adolescents viewed television 147 minutes per day on average of 17 and a quarter hours per week. That's basically time wasted on television where they could have been like finding a job, working out, getting a job, or reading. In conclusion, explicit scenes on TV and time wasted on TV is harmful to adolescents because there is way more beneficial alternatives to watching TV. Thank you.
All right, the proposition's very clear. The contents are laid out at the beginning of the speech, and the body of the speech are signposting everything clearly, so it's very well structured and easy to follow. The individual evidence is cited pretty effectively. I do think that there are some inferences here that require bigger leaps than the data supports, but there are also some places where you provide some pretty good explanation as to the relationship between these behaviors and the things that they've observed. So, for example, the one place that I saw was a little bit problematic. You've got several examples of random teenage behavior that's destructive in some way, modeling the Jackass program, for example, without necessarily demonstrating that that's in fact what the kids were doing, that they'd been exposed to those programs. It just is kind of a generic statement about the stupid things that kids do, and then they videotape those sorts of things. I think that's real, you seem to be implying that's because of the Jackass effect, and I'm not exactly sure that that's the issue. It may have to do with the ease of technology. Everybody's got a cell phone with video recording capability. That makes it a lot easier to do those kinds of things. My guess would be the causality has more to do with the technology than it does to exposure to these sorts of things. But that's, like I said, a potential argument for the respondent to make. I think that you're making a bigger inference here than is supportable. The argument on, adult behavior on the first point, there's some good information here concerning you have a couple of studies that make inferences about sexual behavior or about the consumption of alcohol that is potentially problematic. The consumption of alcohol one seemed to me to be geared more toward branding than it did to long-term behavior. So I'm not sure that that supports the point that you're saying entirely, but the inference that you're making, I can see that there's a relationship there. The delivery of the presentation is a little problematic. You don't really have a lot of eye contact, and we didn't spend a lot of time on a whole variety of public delivery issues, but you've got nervous hands. You're cracking your knuckles and washing your hands in the invisible air constantly, and that kind of undermines your ethos a little bit. So you want to watch those things. When you watch your video, you'll see that it's not a huge thing, but it'll be one of those things that people will notice, and they'll say, well, why am I listening to this person? Because they don't seem like they're very confident in the things they're saying. When in fact, I thought you had good source citations, and you did a good job citing information, so let that do the talking for you instead of these distracting behaviors. Thank you.